FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
Germaine Greer wrote recently that the reason she wrote The Female Eunuch 40 years ago now was that she wanted to work out why giving women the vote, a huge thing, had made, and what she said, it had made very little difference to the masculine power structure. That's what feminism was supposed to do. 40 years on, a lot's happened, a lot of good things have happened. Equal opportunity laws, sex discrimination laws, equal pay for equal work, on paper at least. But again, we'd argue that it has still made very little difference to the masculine power structure. If we're going to get beyond, in this debate, a glass half full side on this side and a glass half empty, statistics back and forth, we need to question what feminism was really supposed to do. Has it achieved, and we'd argue it hasn't, has it achieved real change in the powerful institutions that actually make the decisions about what we'll talk about, frame the debates about what we talk about, or it hasn't? And has the real culture, not just the culture for the women up here and the man up here, has the real culture that our boys and girls grow up in, has that changed substantially? Now, culturally, I'd have to take issue with Jennifer, who said, look, feminism has been so successful, we barely notice it. I'd argue that in Australia, sexism is so embedded, we barely notice it. And not just we don't notice it, even if we do, most people have stopped fighting for it. I'll give you one example. Body image issues. Big issues, young women in particular, young girls, crippled by anxiety about how thin they are. So what do? We set up a national advisory committee on body image, a very feminist way to do things. And Kate Ellis, the gorgeous Kate Ellis, and Sarah Murdoch, ex-model, and the beautiful Mia Friedman launched the campaign on body image. And you don't have to be in the media to know that the reason they did that was obvious, because it would get no publicity if they had plain, ugly, fat women launching a committee on body image. Defeated almost before the campaign is launched. Marie Claire, terribly worried about the unrealistic images of women in magazines. What do? They put Jen Hawkins nude on the cover of Marie Claire to launch a campaign about better representations of women. You can say that's just pop culture, but we'd argue that it is actually the culture, and feminism has very little influence on that anymore. Greer, when she wrote, she said that, look, she looked at why voting didn't have much influence on the power structure, and she said, look, feminism is supposed to be about freedom. It's about, and the women at that time, 40 years ago, mostly women housewives she was talking about, they weren't free for a number of reasons, and I reckon they're equally valid today. They weren't free, and I'll run through a few of them, because there was an endless struggle with conflicting demands of others. As workers, carer, mother, sex object, women were alienated from their own sexual desires, and women were exploited by a beauty industry that makes money out of female anxiety. So 40 years on, where are we? Is it less contradictory to be a young woman today? Is pole dancing empowering for me or not? The Age runs many stories on that topic. Do I want to be a slut today or not? I'm not sure. I want to have kids, but my career will disappear, and it will disappear. Is female sexuality any less defined by men now than it was 40 years ago? You'd have to say that that's worse, because now young men have been brought up with an idea of sexuality, or female sexuality, that's based on pornography. Is the beauty industry exploiting women any less than it did? You'd have to say, not really, because no longer do women have to be young and beautiful when they are young, but they have to be young and beautiful when they are old. I was disturbed recently to see a photograph on the cover of Good Weekend of Blanche de Pouget, who'd written a book on Bob Hawke, and she's a woman in her 60s, and she looked embalmed. Feminism has no answer to any of it. They form committees, they're academics writing books, they have forums like this. But real women say, particularly young women say, well yeah, this is the real world I'm living in. I have to make sense of the contradictions of being a woman in this kind of culture. And what you say is not helping me deal with it anymore.